For the record, my name is Tania Fernandes Anderson, the District 7 City Councilor. I am the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Ways and Means. This hearing is being recorded. It is being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Fios Channel 964. The Council's budget review process will encompass a series of public hearings beginning in April and running through June. We strongly encourage residents to take a moment to engage in this process by giving testimony for the record. You can do this in several ways. Attend one of our hearings and give public testimony. We will take public testimony at each departmental hearing and also at 2 hearings dedicated to public testimony. The full hearing schedule is on our website, boston.gov/council-budget. Our scheduled hearings dedicated to public testimony was on April 26th at 6 p.m. and the following will be on June 2nd at 6 p.m. You can give testimony in person here in the chamber or virtually via Zoom. For in-person testimony, please come to the chamber and sign up on the sheet near the entrance. For virtual testimony, you can sign up using our online form on our Council Budget Review website or by emailing the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov. When you are called to testify, please state your name, affiliation, and residence, and limit your comments to 2 minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. Email your written testimony to the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov. Submit a 2-minute video of your testimony through the form on our website. For more information on the City Council budget process and how to testify, please visit the City Council's budget website at boston.gov/council-budget. Today's hearing is on docket 0480 to 0482, orders for the FY23 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations for the school department and for other post-employment benefits, OPEB. Docket 0483, orders for capital fund transfer appropriations. Dockets 0484 to 0486, orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. Our focus area for this hearing will be Office of Equity, Office of Resiliency and Racial Equity, Human Rights Commission. Our panelists for today's hearing are Mariangeli Solis Cervera, Chief of Equity and Inclusion, Office of Equity; Lori Nelson, Chief Resilience Officer, Mayor's Office of Resilience and Racial Equity; Susie Helmy, Interim Director, Human Rights Commission. I am joined today by my colleagues, Councilor President Ed Flynn, Councilor Bach, District 8, and a very special welcome to newly elected Councilor Gabriela Coletta, District 1, Councilor Julia Mejia at large, Councilor Kendra Lara, District 6, Councilor Ruthie Lujan at large, Councilor Brian Rorel, District 4. Just for our format for this meeting, today we will listen to your presentation, the administration presentation together. I hear that you have 2 presentations for all 3 departments, and then we'll go to actually virtual to public testimony, just one particular special one that we have today from an elementary classroom. And then we'll I'll turn over to my colleagues for questioning. They will have 8 minutes. It's up to them to monitor their time. I ask you, counselors, please do not ask all 8 minutes of questions, because then I will only give them 2 minutes to answer. Because then if you do 8 minutes of questions, 8 minutes of answers, that's 16 minutes, not 8. We want to wrap it up at around 10 minutes, if that's okay. And then we'll go to in-person testimony and whomever's left on virtual, and then to second round, and then if time allows, a third round. Without further ado, I will now turn over to the floor to hear your testimony. Please, again, state your name, your position, and of course, affiliation, and you may begin.
Buenos días, everyone. I'll say that again. Buenos días. My name is Maria Angeli Solis Cervera, and I'm the Chief of Equity and Inclusion. Really nice to be back in the space with you all, and I'm joined today by my colleagues, Lori Nelson and Susie Helmy, who you'll hear from directly in a couple minutes. Okay. Where should I? Is there a specific place I should be pointing at? I'm a former teacher, I can handle this. But in the meantime, I'll give a brief overview. Oh, here we go.
Can you just please state which presentation you'll do first?
Yes, so I am, oh, of course. Sorry, thank you. Yes, I'll be focusing on, and I'm gonna be explaining this because it has been confusing, and I want to make sure that we're all clear. But I'm going to be speaking on the larger Equity and Inclusion Cabinet, focused on the Office of Equity, which is the core team, and I'll get into that in just a second. Okay, so before I begin, I just wanted to say a few words first on what I'm hoping to accomplish in the next 10, 15 minutes. I'm really seeing this as an opportunity for me to be able to introduce the Equity and Inclusion Cabinet. That is what we're calling a baby cabinet. It's not even 2 years old. And I will say that it's not a secret, but I'm chief number 3 in less than a year, and 3 different administrations. And so for anybody who's ran any form of organizations, it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to really think about how do we build this ship as we are flying it with the leadership that you'll hear from today. Okay, so first, a little bit about what we've been up to since January. The moment I came in, my first goal was to obviously get to know the staff that was already present in the cabinet. At that point, it was about 31, 32 people. I did what some call a listening tour in order for us to be able to answer the question of what are our current strengths, areas of growth, opportunities to collaborate, and some potential threats to the work that we're trying to accomplish here. Then, from the staff, I moved on to connecting with the leadership of every cabinet throughout the city. As somebody who's brand new to City Hall, I wanted to get a sense of who's who, who's doing what, who's responsible for what, and what are some questions that we already have around issues of equity and inclusion. Then that information has really helped inform and shape the way that we are taking the larger cabinet and also the what we're calling the Office of Equity. As you all know, and so I'm going to now go through a couple of things that we've been up to since then. In February, we launched the Office of Black Male Advancement. And I'm going to say I'm a little bit sad that I'm going to miss the press conference, but today we're announcing our 21 members of the Commission of Black Men and Boys. Finally, after a really rigorous process of selecting 21 members in the city. Then in March, we launched the Office of LGBTQ Advancement and the search for the inaugural executive director, who we're hoping to have fully onboarded by the new fiscal year. We also welcomed the Office of Fair Housing and Equity into the cabinet after the executive order of Mayor Wu, my favorite word, to affirmatively further fair housing. ESL here, so help me out. Then one announcement that I'm really excited to share, this is the first time that we share this publicly, Commissioner Makash from the Disabilities Commission will officially be joining our Equity and Inclusion Cabinet because she and I understand that this is part of the larger conversation, and something that we're going to be looking into is that she is really excited to do as well, is how do we apply a racial equity lens to the conversation of disabilities that often is left behind. Something that I'm really excited about, I know that some of you were at the Democracy Day at Binka a couple of, months, weeks ago, and one student raised to the mayor that she's like, my last name is, I don't remember her last name, but it has an accent, and her diploma never shows an accent because we use Old English in diplomas. And so thanks to the leadership of Mayor Wu and the leadership in BPS, we're going to be piloting what it would look like for families and students' full names to be reflected in diplomas in 3 different high schools this year, with the intention of making this a possibility in every high school moving forward. Partnership between the Mayor's Office and the Language and Communications Access Office, led by Jennifer Rivera-Wong, who you heard from 2 weeks ago, to ensure that anything from press releases, advisories, et cetera, are making it to media that is also reaching our different communities on the ground. Relaunched the immigrant serving media roundtables that started under the leadership of Yusufi Valley in immigrant advancement to ensure that during COVID we were communicating directly with community partners, et cetera. We relaunched that again under the Wu administration. And I'm gonna add number 10 as just, on my first week, I submitted a budget that I got an extension of 2 weeks actually, thanks to then Chief Starrett, to help us really lay the foundation for the work ahead. I don't have to tell this council we have hundreds of years to undo, and so I understand that we have some urgent things to do today, but we also have to think about the long term here, and so that I'm hoping to talk a little bit more about that. And this is our really cute team. Okay. I'm now gonna share something that is also the first time that we are sharing publicly between the mayor's office, our team, and all the listening that I've been doing internally to ensure that the work from Dr. Atia Martin, from Lori, from Dr. Crockett, from Selena, and now me, that has been led on the ground, is actually embedded into this equity and inclusion statement. And so I'm gonna give you 10 seconds to read it on your own, and then I'm happy to give a voiceover in just a second.
To read what?
The equity and inclusion statement, if you need a moment to read it first, but I'll read it out loud too.
No, you can go on.
Okay.
You have less than 10 minutes left.
Less than 10 minutes left? Okay. So the City of Boston acknowledges the root causes of the present and historical inequalities that persist in our society. White supremacy, patriarchy, transphobic, anti-Black, anti-immigrant policies that are rooted in every system that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. We believe that we can build a city for everyone where race, ability, age, gender, identity, languages spoken, life experiences, national origins, sexual orientation, socioeconomic circumstance, or religion do not determine life outcomes, but rather make us a more empowered people. You've heard the mayor say time and time again that equity requires that we do the small things right to get the big things done, that we get City Hall at a City Hall, and that we also embrace what's possible. And we are defining equity as a proactive process, a verb, an action of providing historically excluded communities the resources they need to live and thrive in Boston, and meeting everyone where they are. While inclusion requires the intentional maintaining and creating of structures that allow for people who are of different backgrounds to be and feel included. And I just want to share with this statement, the idea here being is that this is going to lay the foundation for all departments and all cabinets to understand how we are defining equity and setting an expectation of how we do the work moving forward. Okay. As for the cabinet, so let me just show you the org chart. It may be more helpful actually at the moment. So the org chart in front of you shows in dark gray what on paper is called the Office of Equity. So the core team that is helping me drive sort of the work forward. We currently have an administrative project coordinator, we have a director of internal strategy, and we have a director of communications and community outreach. The people with asterisks are folks that we are recommending for the FY23 budget to continue to help us lay the foundation. And I have a fun announcement that I plan to say in the next 2 minutes as to who else is part of this core team. And then under are the 8 different departments that some of you have already known, some of you perhaps don't. But on the left, we have offices that all end with advancement, right? So you have immigrant advancement, MOWA, women's advancement, LGBTQ, and the Office of Black Male Advancement. In the middle, you have the 3 different commissions, that each of them are their own departments too. Fair Housing and Equity, Human Rights Commission, who you'll hear from today, and the Disabilities Commission that I already talked about. And then obviously we have the Language and Communications Access Office. So 8 different offices under the larger cabinet. Now I go back to this one. The mission of the Office of Equity, so the ones that were in dark gray, is to ensure that every resident has access to the opportunities and the resources offered in City Hall, right? And there are 3 buckets that we are prioritizing at the moment because we believe that helps us get short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals achieved. So first, embedding equity and inclusion into current city practices, building our collective capacity around and understanding around issues of race and social justice, and then obviously an opportunity for us to also get creative and design programs that empower constituents as well. These are the folks that I named just now around the core staff. We have Ayana Polk, who's a director of community engagement and communications. Guadalupe Morales Martinez, who's administrative and project coordinator, and Eliseo Debina, who is a director of internal strategy, and he's going to be leading the work around the employee resource groups as well. And I'll end with this. Again, FY23 for us is about laying the foundation to do this long-term work. The 3 buckets of work I've already named, embedding equity and inclusion into current city practices, really focusing on what are current systems that we can actually change by FY24, right? So we're looking into improving the budget system that I thank you all for all the different questions that you've addressed during the different hearings. That's helping shape how we're gonna think about FY24 budget season. And also piloting different partnerships with departments throughout the city, whether that's with human resources or with finance, et cetera, thinking about different ways of doing transforming the current systems. In the middle, and Lori will speak a lot more about this, it's building our collective capacity on issues of race and social justice. We're gonna be piloting a program that we're calling Equity and Inclusion Fellows Program, which is internal staff, cabinet by cabinet, really helping build that capacity internally in their cabinets. Again, we'll touch more base on this. And then finally, on the very far right, designing programs that empower constituents to thrive. We see our 18,000+ employee workforce as also constituents, and so we're seeing the employee resource groups as an opportunity for us to really push forward internal policy and external policy as well. And then finally, convening leadership across different sectors that perhaps we haven't tapped into, and I'm really looking forward to the work that you already are doing, have been doing, and we can potentially partner with. And with that, I'll pause on the presentation, and I know we have a Q&A, but I want to just before that.
You can continue in your presentation. The Q&A is after everyone presents.
Perfect.
You only have 2 minutes for that, so I don't know if you want to pass it on to someone else. We'll reset the clock to give you a max of like 6 minutes.
Councilor Hatzer, so we have 2 minutes for also, I thought it was 20.
I'm just adding another 5 minutes. No, 20 for the whole thing, for the whole.
Including human rights?
Yes. So it's usually just 5 minutes per person. Did you have so much more to continue?
No, but Lori does need to say a few words, and then Susie has a couple of words.
That might be a good idea. It's up to you.
Okay. So I just want to make a quick announcement. Some of you are already aware of this, but Lori Nelson, who has been leading the charge here and has been amazing, is the least I can say, in the last 4 months that I've been in this role, which she'll be stepping in into the core team as our new senior advisor on racial justice. Because as a light-skinned queer...
Sorry.
As a light-skinned queer Latina, I understand that while I approach the work with a last person first mindset, I understand that there will always be gaps in the work that I do, and so I'm really looking forward to this partnership with a civil rights, a racial justice leader that I look up to so much already.
Congratulations, Chief Lori.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Very glad to be here. Very quickly, I think my charge is to run you through and let us work through what is the core of the work, which is called REAL, stands for Race, Equity, and Leadership Training.
Chief, can you move closer to your mic?
Can you hear me? Is that better?
Yes,
I'm
much
just trying to, okay, let me try to position myself better. Can you all hear me? Everyone can hear me, that's better, all right. And so the REAL training, which is led, well, it is led by the Mayor's Office of Resiliency and Racial Equity and Leadership Training. It is a racial equity training for all city of Boston employees. The training was mandated by an executive order of 2019. It's relative to racial equity and leadership. This action strengthens Boston's commitment to advancing racial equality and equal opportunity to all of its residents. And, can you help me with this? Thank you. And so some of the core components of where we are to date, which is to build our collective capacity. We started off this journey with an unconscious bias, asynchronous training. That training was really people coming in as individuals and signing up to take the first part of the training. Our numbers to date are 4,431 of City of Boston staff have completed the training. All current City of Boston staff have access to this training, and this training is available through June 30th. Part A, which is laying the foundation for racial equity, which started July 2021 and will end in the end of this month. Out of that, 3,297 City of Boston staff have completed this 3-hour training. We were excited about these numbers, and we still have more to go. We had 578 sessions that were offered, and we accommodated up to 30 participants for each of these sessions. The part B, which is what we believe is the deeper dive, kind of like the root cause work, right? That will begin and has started now through June of 2022. Our goal is to train 300 to 700 city leaders will participate in this training. Out of this, 44 sessions are scheduled to be offered. And again, we will be accommodating up to 30 participants for each of these. We've also been excited, and Chief mentioned this, to really look at this as a way to embark on the next tier. Next tier would include the Equity and Inclusion Fellows, which is considered a train the trainer. Our goal was never to have this to be one and done. The goal was always to continue to move this work forward. The question became, how do we do that in a way that continues to include our employees and leadership and to ensure that they are continuing the mission to move forward? So the Equity and Inclusion Fellows Train the Trainers program will begin in June. And this is 16-hour, 4-part Equity and Inclusion Fellows training has been designed to equip up to 30 City of Boston Equity Fellows in facilitating Part A, which was the first part of the training that we went through. These sessions include a deep dive. The second session is roles and expectations and facilitation, and of course, best practices as we tackle this everyday issue of racial equity and social justice. And then the third and fourth sessions are looking at practice and feedback. So, as it relates to the training on the whole, we certainly looked at our partners in this work in BPS. When we worked with BPS going into this whole curriculum, it was clear that BPS had already done some of their own training work. And so we worked with our consultants to create a way to have them continue to work with us and to build upon how we move forward. And so they are working on asynchronous training our consultants have worked with them to help them develop this in their version of their racial equity trainings. And with that, I think I am done, and we'll turn it back over.
I don't know why I did on my microphone, but I'm gonna make sure that Susie gets a few minutes in.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Susie Helmy, and I am the Interim Director for the Human Rights Commission. I've been stepping in as Interim Director for the past 3 weeks. So I'll just fly by as fast as I can through my presentation for the sake of time. Just a brief commission history. Our office was reactivated in August 2019. The Executive Director was appointed in August 2019. Our 7 commissioners were appointed in January 2020. An executive assistant was hired May 2020. Our first commission meeting was in June 2020. And from August 2021 to November 2021, we grew our team to include our education outreach manager, our investigator, and our director of research and analysis. Our mission is to enforce human rights, to engage in relationships and partnerships that embody the principles of dignity and respect, and to create a culture of human rights compliance and accountability. We act as a driver for social change based on principles of substantive equality, equity, and inclusion for all. This is our team. So again, I'm Susie, Interim Director. Amber Garcia Gonzalez is our investigator. Quincy J. Roberts is our Education and Outreach Manager. And Roy Watt is our Director of Research and Analysis. I just thought it'd be really important to show the diversity of our staff. We have a really diverse group. So we have 4 nationalities. I am half Greek and half Egyptian. Amber is Dominican American. Quincy is African American / Black. And Roy is Japanese. Within the 4 of us, we speak Greek, Spanish, limited Arabic, and limited Japanese. There are 3 different age ranges and several different religious backgrounds between the 4 of us. We also have 4 bachelor's degree, a PhD, and a Juris Doctorate on our team. So our commission's operation is twofold. We provide direct services to residents to help them with issues of discrimination and to conduct investigation, research, and studies on systematic issues of equity in the city. So we do have 2 intake forms located on our website. In FY22, we received a total of 18 intakes. 16 of them to date have been successfully referred out and 2 are currently in progress. I put up on the slide, these are the protected classes associated with our intake form, and please keep in mind that you can choose more than 1 protected class for each intake. Our anonymous incident report is available on our website and is translated in 12 different languages. We do have a plan to translate our intake form in also the 12 different languages. So we received a total of 11 submissions. And with this form, you can choose to be contacted or not to be contacted after yours. All that have chosen to be contacted have been successfully assisted and referred out. Again, these are the protected classes for the intakes that we've received for the anonymous incident report. We have just successfully created a referral partnership with the Boston Police Civil Rights Unit. This means that we will receive incidents of discrimination, specifically those not amounting to a crime, or if the victim does not wish to pursue the matter in court. And this creation came through the conversation that we had with Councillor Flynn just last week about hate crimes and discrimination being such a huge issue in our city. So this is one step that we're taking to help do better for our residents in Boston. Briefly through our initiatives for the digital divide. This entails researching the issues of disparity in access to computers and internet. We've had several public meetings about this, along with 2 separate hearings. We also had a PhD candidate conduct research on this issue. All of our research is available on our website. Specifically, our next initiative is protecting LGBTQ+ residents. So in partnership with the Office of Neighborhood Services, we created the Boston Pride Initiative, the Beyond Pride Initiative, excuse me. And this entailed facilitating 3 focus groups, the frequently asked question seats, Visited sites as the Family Justice Center and Roxbury Youth Works, the Boston Beyond Pride survey, and we have also presented along Deputy Superintendent Richard Dayhill to the latest graduated class of Boston police officers. Our third initiative is the Boston Police Department of Foreign Task Force recommendations that came out in 2020.
Sorry, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up in just 1 minute.
Sure.
You guys are about a half hour in now.
Sure. Thank you. Our task force recommendations, we've had research conducted by our interns on it, which also is available on our website. We also are doing a data collection listening tour, which includes reaching out to all forward-facing departments to see if any common issues arise out of each different constituent group that our departments face. And I will end it with staff trainings. We have made it a priority to get the entire staff trained on human rights and discrimination issues. So at the moment, we have training set up offered by the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, which includes employment discrimination, sexual harassment, public accommodation, and housing discrimination. I believe that trainings are just the fundamental issue that we can do to better educate and serve our residents. And I will end it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have our virtual public testimony ready? Thank you, Ms. Cora. Ready? Do you know the name of the teacher? Okay. No worries. I can't read your writing though. You typed it, thanks. Hi, Alex. I can't see that. Alex?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you all? Thanks for having us this morning.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We really appreciate this. This is a pleasant surprise. How many students do you have ready to testify?
I have 4 students. They are testifying in pairs, and we're missing one from each pair. It said the button maybe disappeared. Is it possible to invite them as a panelist again?
Typically, Alex, the testimonies are after our questions, so we'll allow the 2 that you have ready, and then they'll have just about 1 minute to 2 minutes to testify. And then if you want to come back after our questioning, then we can allow you back in.
Okay, they're all on and ready to go now. We'll have Silas and Eamon start. We were told 2 to 4 minutes was okay, so the second one might be closer to 3 minutes, if that's all right.
Yeah, you have 2 minutes each.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So Silas and Eamon, why don't you all unmute and you can start.
All right. Hello. We, Silas Rosenberger and Eamon Conway, are 6th graders at the Advent School in Beacon Hill. We've been studying the history of racism against Black Americans in social studies since the beginning of the school year, all the way from the start of the slave trade to modern-day racial inequalities. We heard there was a proposal to create a commission to study reparations for Black Americans in Boston, and we think that's a great idea.
For one thing, Boston is guilty of a lot of redlining. In our science class, we have been learning about urban heat islands, and these heat islands correspond exactly where the Black neighborhoods in Boston or other racial minority populations are higher. For example, Mattapan is one of the hottest neighborhoods in Boston, and it is also majority black. In addition to redlining, even in Boston, there has been a lot of police brutality, over 15 deaths in Boston alone since 2000. This statistic may not sound like a lot in relation to some cities, but 15 deaths is too many deaths for many innocent people.
We have some suggestions about what reparations Boston should give. To begin with, the city could put at least $10,000 in savings accounts for Black children, which can grow with interest and help them give enough money to pay for higher education, which can get them farther in the world and avoid debt. Another reparation should be helping Black people pay off their mortgages so they won't have to worry about the bank taking possession of their house. You could also lower taxes on homes owned by Black people so that they can build more wealth.
We have, to fund this, you could take some money from public safety because the police are currently causing more hurt than help. Also, you could take some from city departments because that wouldn't hurt too much. For example, some could be taken from the archaeology department in the city budget because it isn't as important as the problems of people being homeless and suffering from racism. You can also use the money from cannabis tax revenue, as Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Evanston, Illinois are doing.
In conclusion, we think that creating a reparations committee is a great idea, and we hope you choose to do so. If you do, we'd like you to please consider our ideas and hopefully put some of them in effect. Thank you for your time.
Silas and Iman, you guys are amazing. You're brilliant, you're courageous, and you are so smart. I appreciate you. We all appreciate you. Can we have a round of applause for Cyrus and Iman, please?
All right, Sol and Kiara, are you ready?
Hello, our names are Sol Gregorio and Kiara Pott. We are 6th grade students at the Advent School in Beacon Hill. Throughout this year, we have been learning about the history of African Americans in the United States from slavery all the way up to modern day. Recently, we have been studying about reparations, but learned that no reparations have been given for slavery, aside from Evanston, Illinois, very recently. This needs to change.
Boston was one of the biggest cities that took part in the Atlantic slave trade. Some people believe that reparations for slavery don't have to be made because it ended more than 160 years ago, and so nobody alive right now is directly involved and should have to make up for it. However, the impact of slavery still affects people today. Slavery has caused historical trauma to the enslaved people and their descendants. In addition, when Black Americans were emancipated in 1865, they were left with no money or assets. They were promised 40 acres of land and a mule, but this never happened. Those 40 acres could have turned into $3 trillion of generational wealth today, which Black Americans were wrongly denied. There are also many lasting biases against Black people that started during slavery. For example, a 2003 study showed that there's a 50% difference in callback rates for jobs, depending on whether one has a stereotypically white or Black-sounding name, even with the same qualifications. In addition, the average salary for Black people is 25% lower than the average salary for white people with the same jobs in Boston. All historical and current racial biases prevent Black Americans from gaining wealth in the way which white people are able to, which impacts the next generations as well.
One tangible reparation for this that should be made is setting up homeownership programs for Black Americans, such as Councilor Anderson's rent-to-own program proposal, or Evanston's housing loans. Funding for affordable housing, however, is not appropriate reparations as it forces individuals to stay at low income to receive the benefits, which is not fair for individuals who deserve opportunity to build wealth. Other reparations should include increasing funding and resources for public schools in predominantly Black neighborhoods. Helping these kids have more equal education opportunities at a young age would give them a strong foundation that would help kick off a successful path through school as well as future job opportunities. Also, resources for the health and healing of Black families and communities should be more widely available. It is important that these resources be culturally viable to avoid the discriminatory experiences that Black individuals often face in our healthcare system.
An important part of reparations is also the money needed to fund it. Currently, the City of Boston splits its budget into 7 different sections. We suggest cutting the public safety portion from 18% to 9% of the budget and use that money for reparations in Boston instead. We hope our testimony will help inspire you to take action in making reparations for Black Americans in Boston. Thank you for your time.
Oh, my goodness. Can we please, thank you so much, Sol and Kiara, can we please have that in writing? Can you submit it to us?
We have a whole bunch of letters for you too. We have lots of other sixth graders who have written, so we'll drop those off in your offices at some point in the coming weeks.
I appreciate you. The council appreciates you. Does anyone have any comments for the students before we go? Councilor Lara, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for being so studious but also so courageous with your solutions and bringing them to the City Council. I went to my first protest when I was in the 6th grade and started organizing when I was just 15. So I'm a really, really big supporter of youth voice and youth organizing, and it makes me incredibly happy to see that young people are still leading the way and really being visionaries when it comes to finding creative solutions for our problems. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson, for giving us an opportunity to say hello, and thank you all for your fierce advocacy. I just told Councilor Latta that you've solved the world's problems in this presentation, and so we have our marching orders. Really do appreciate not only you uplifting the work, but providing some very specific examples of where we can go after those dollars to make this happen. So thank you for your research and for your powerful voice and testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Lujan, you have the floor.
Yes, I just want to echo what everyone's been saying and say thank you so much for speaking up. If anybody wants to know what allyship looks like, you are demonstrating what it means to be an ally and what it means to be doing the work in partnership with all of us. So may you continue on this road. I think, is it David Starr is in that classroom as well? So I want to give a shout out to him and to the work that's being done in that classroom and to the great job the teachers doing in really helping our young kids be curious and really pushing them and thinking what are some policy solutions to some of our most difficult issues, and y'all are leading the way. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilor Lujan. Councilor Bach, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Advent School students. I'm so proud to be your counselor, and you guys always blow us away. And yeah, it's great as the counselor from Beacon Hill to hear students on Beacon Hill, which, as we know, is one of the real hearts of the history of Black Americans in this country. Have you guys coming and, like Councilor Lujan said, showing up as such good allies, and really appreciate all those really concrete suggestions for reparations. So thanks so much to you all.
Thank you, class, and thank you to your teacher for all this work, and we look forward to connecting with you and doing the work.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
See you soon. Thank you. All right. We will return to our agenda. I'm going to turn to, I can't wait to ask questions, but I will continue in the tradition that we've started here. Councilor President Flynn, you may go first. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panelists for the important work that you're doing. Thank you for the presentation. It was helpful, informative. I know I had several conversations with you in the past, and thank you for working with me on many of these issues. And I'm glad to know that you're developing a partnership with the Boston Police on hate crimes and assaults, a reporting way, so that they can be fully investigated. So that's important, and I just want to acknowledge the professionalism of your team. And it came about because it came about because an elderly woman in my district who was Asian was assaulted. And, you know, a lot of assaults that happen to immigrants and happen to people of color and happen to, you know, people with disabilities or LGBTQ, a lot of these assaults don't get reported, unfortunately. So the crime stats are somewhat misleading. So the important work that you do, and I also know that you have an intake so residents can put something into the system, whether it's anonymous or in person. And I know I've placed many of these in the intake. I always use my name, but I also respect people that don't use their name, but it's an incredible opportunity. So just want to highlight that. So I had a question on the intake. Can you just tell me what the numbers are next to the categories? You know, like I see race 10 or gender 4 or age 4 or disability 1. I'm not sure what that means.
I don't know. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. So in FY22, we received a total of 18 intakes. So for example, 10 of the intakes, individuals have checked off as race being the protected class.
Okay.
And again, just to keep in mind that more than one protected class can be associated for one intake.
Okay. No, that's good to know. Thank you for that.
Of course.
I also know the important work of Deputy Superintendent Richard Dayhill on the Boston Police in the outreach he does on LGBTQ related issues. So what is the Boston Police doing in terms of educating residents about how they report a hate crime to the police? How are we going to do that?
When we met with the Boston Police Civil Rights Unit, they did state that they do outreach to try to push residents to make sure they report, whether they think that something can be done or not, to report it. In a conversation that we will have in the future, we will talk more about maybe potentially conducting outreach together to promote the importance of reporting and knowing your rights. As of right now, I don't know details on how their outreach goes, but I know that that's a conversation we have with them and a potential conversation or another partnership that we might have in the future working together with outreach.
Okay, that sounds good. I wanted to acknowledge the Human Rights Commission. They do tremendous work. It was established in, I believe it was 84, 85 under Mayor Flynn, so I wanted to mention that. So the office, are we talking also about the Office of Food Access at this time? No, we're not talking about that.
Food justice is now under the Environment, Parks, and Open Space cabinet.
Okay. So I also know the important role the Office of Disability Access plays in our city, and I know that's a department that will be under your leadership as well. They play an important role in this city, and what I have advocated for over the last 5 years is when there's a development project happening in Boston, whether it's a large one especially or a small one, but mostly if it's a large one, that the Office of Disability, Commissioner Mayor's Office of Disability Access, that their opinion is also factored in, is weighed in. We want to make sure when we do development projects that, the disability community has a way to offer testimony, offer their advice, offer recommendations on how this project may or may not assist persons with disabilities. So just wanted to ask your thoughts about that request.
Yes, my understanding is that Commissioner McCosh has been included in a lot of these conversations, but I will make sure that that is part of. We're going to be developing sort of, if you want to think about rubrics, if you will, as to how we need to ensure that we're including all these different perspectives. So yes, I thank you for that recommendation.
Okay, and I know the staff and commissioners that you have in your departments, they're very professional, including a young man named Quincy Roberts. So I wanted to give a shout out to Quincy, who I've known for many years. Madam Chair, that's all I have for right now. I just want to say thank you to you, Madam Chair, but also thank you to the panelists for the important work they're doing.
Thank you, Council President Flynn. Councilor Bach, you have the floor.
Great, thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thanks so much to the panelists for being here. And Lori, congratulations. Lori and I were co-workers at the BHA not actually that long ago, but really appreciate all your important work. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is, I was pleased to support last year getting $50,000 in the budget for just, our employee resource groups to be able to actually like have events. And really grateful to Ellie So, who I know is new and I think is around or was around, for making sure that, we can actually get those dollars to our folks before June 30th this year. I'm curious if that's something that is being extended into next year's fiscal budget.
Yes. So yes, shout out to Eliso, who's been amazing since I came in. That budget is going to be absorbed into the core team as well. So yes.
But it'll continue. So the ERGs will have money again next year. Okay.
And we will not pressure them in April. We will ask them to spend it way before that.
Yes. Looking forward. That would be great. But I'm glad we're getting out of the door. And then Susie, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit, and it's a little bit of a blue sky question. So, whatever your thoughts are now, and then would love to follow up in the future. But it has always seemed to me, and I'll say that really my views on this are pretty informed by Councillor Coletta's predecessor, Councillor Edwards' point of view on it. But I think Councillor Edwards has always made a good point that with the HRC, we should think about what are the protected classes under the HRC and the powers of the HRC that differentiate it from the MCAD, because the MCAD is a bigger entity and there's a lot of like formal state processes that it owns, and we're never going to sort of compete with the MCAD as it were, nor would it be an especially good use of city resources. So I think the interesting question is kind of like, how could we use the HRC as a tool to go after things that don't really fall under the MCAD remit? And I'm curious sort of if there are any areas from your perspective that feel like the places where we as the city can really kind of like add value or have a comparative advantage through the work of the Human Rights Commission.
I do know from past conversations with individuals that have either filled out our intake or others, they have said that, for example, the MCD do take a lengthy time for their investigation, so that's something that HRC could especially help in, especially in the residents in our city. I do not have a full answer to your question, but we are thinking of that as we kind of rebrand and restructure with this new administration, with me being new to this role. So I am really happy to follow up and hear your thoughts.
Great. No, and I think that as we think about the HRC, I think people often ask us sort of, well, what is the HRC doing? And the HRC has like a really broad remit, which I think it's great in one sense, but on the other hand, like I'd rather be able to reliably tell constituents, if you've experienced this type of discrimination, go to the HRC, they're really good at chasing that down, and acknowledge the places where it might be better to go to a different forum. So that would be my kind of push as we move forward here. And then the other thing is just, have you guys, to what extent have you guys really talked with DoIT at kind of like a leadership or strategic level about the takeaways from your digital divide work?
So Mike Lynch from Do It did come to one of our commission meetings and spoke to what the city was doing and the issues that he's seeing with residents with digital inequities. And I know that hopefully, I think it's coming up this month, there's going to be another kind of collaboration meetings with all the departments regarding the digital divide. I don't know if that answers your question. I think it does.
Well, I think obviously we have new leadership at Do It, like
Right.
we're, but I think, it came up yesterday, the council's continuing to sort of push on digital equity,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that, like, to me, when I watch the HRC hearings and talk to your chair and everything, like, it seemed like, the real thrust of why the HRC was in the space of the digital divide was because, like, it's having this discriminatory impact on so many of our residents. And so I wonder if there's a way to kind of, when we think about, like, bringing the work of the equity cabinet into some of the larger departments in the city, like helping add that lens as Do It thinks about, municipal broadband and how muscular we, the city, should be about really high quality internet access for all. I just feel like that's one of the places where I would love to see the dots get connected, and I feel like maybe they haven't really been from your guys' work into that. So I know I met Santiago yesterday, and that the city's new CDO and CIO are both just getting in. They've just gotten in. So I don't know, Chief, if you want to speak to
definitely an opportunity for partnership. Let's make sure to connect with Chief Santi Garces. I will say that I know just from conversations that this is going to be a priority of his as well. So I thank you for this is part of the equity cabinet of how do we ensure that it's not on HRC to be bringing this lens, but it's actually building it through all the other departments and the different programs and initiatives that they're running. So thank you.
Right, and to that end, I guess and it's probably my last question, guessing on time. The Equity and Inclusion Fellows, this sort of vision of training the trainers and building, is there a departmental angle to that? Like, are you trying to have these fellows embedded in a bunch of departments, or is it just kind of like city workforce wide? Because I could imagine a world in which you're training 16, how many are you planning on? 30, up to 30, but you're planning up to 30, but 20 of them come from the Office of Housing, and then it's sort of like, who's left to be trained, right? So, like, how are you thinking about that piece?
Did I do it right? Okay. So it is department-wide, right? And so it's a pilot program. So we're starting with a number that we're going to look towards managing and embedding into how we move it forward. In the original framework of the entire training, this is where we want to land. That is so that each department and each area of city has somebody or somebody's persons, right, who are able to take the training further. That is to say that city departments are continually learning, right, and understanding this whole notion of racial equity and social justice, right, counselors? So this is, again, the pilot, but it will continue to move forward.
Great. No, and I would just say, like, I would love to see it move to a place of, like, we know that each department has somebody who's getting this advanced. Yeah.
So there's two things. This issue addresses one thing that we keep hearing time and time again with any of these trainings. If part of your job is to be in a car, it's hard for you to be engaged in a 3-hour training. And so we're going cabinet by cabinet to ensure that the folks who are in it can actually understand the day-to-day work and can modify the learnings and the teachings according to those. And then to your point, the hope here, the long term, is that we're also building a pipeline for potential equity ambassadors or something like that in the near future of people that want to grow into this work.
Okay, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say also that I hope that as the cabinet grows, that the ability for more feedback from the employee resource group to come to the core teams. My impression has really been that the ERGs are sort of off doing their own thing, and their prior relationship to the diversity office was really one of, like, when they needed a form signed or something. And I just think that our employees have a lot of wisdom about the ways that we can be a more equitable city. And so if we can build that feedback loop stronger, that's something I'd love to see.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Bach. Councilor Coletta, you have the floor. It's just going to stop when you start talking.
Hello. Awesome. Whew, okay, well, this is my first line of questioning, so I need to make sure I come correct. But no, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panelists. Chief Lori, congratulations. Susie, congratulations on your new position. And thank you for your work just to embed racial equity and justice in everything we do in these walls and across the city. And obviously repeating, what everybody in this room knows, but many in this city have been denied justice, right? And they haven't benefited from the same prosperity that others have seen. So this work is extremely important. And I'm so grateful that you all are here and doing this work every day. And I've said to you earlier, but I'll say it for the record, this is my second day, and so diving in, drinking from a fire hose, all of that, so I've done my best to prepare. A lot of my questions had to do with the real training that you answered. So just thank you for that, and I look forward to building that out more. And just really quickly on that before I get to the HRC, when I was here in the council, we went through a training under Dr. T. Martin. And it was incredible. It was, I think it was 2 hours every week for 8 weeks. And it was extremely comprehensive, and I was proud to have been a consistent participant in those trainings. And there were varying levels of participation there. And what I would have liked to have seen in order to have some sort of accountability there was the installation of assessments of the employees who went through it. So that way, at the end of this training and this program, you're going to be tested on your knowledge, or we can measure your knowledge of what you learned about unconscious bias, right? And how to create transformative change in your life and in the systems that you are a part of. So I'm wondering if, there's any measures of success. Are there any assessments that the employees take? My 11th grade English teacher, I have to shout her out, Miss Gentile, she always told me to have my conclusion be the so what. And so I'm wondering if there's a so what after all of these trainings.
I can take this. At the moment, no. And what we are doing, we're working directly with, admin and finance, human resources, to ensure that it's part of the onboarding process for new employees, so that, one, we have a goal of making sure that every staff member is trained by the end of FY23, and embedding it into the onboarding process to ensure that every new staff member into the city understand that this is a priority and is a part of their onboarding process. But the assessment piece, as a former teacher, I have feelings about it, but would love to connect with Lori here to see how we can embed that.
Yeah, so absolutely spot on, Counselor. The original goal was around a universal language. So when this first came into being, it was to ensure that every city employee had the baseline understanding of how the city wanted to move forward relative to racial equity and social justice. To Chief's point, certainly we are pleased that A&F and HR have also taken this very seriously in their commitment to the what happens next, that this becomes part of how we onboard and move a city forward. So that's part one. And certainly we are thinking about accountability and those type of measures, right? Because it's one thing to go through a training such as this and to some extent check a box. It's a different thing to see it embedded in how you then reimagine, right? Recreate or rebrand your departments and how we move a city forward. So that's where we are now.
Awesome. And just a point of clarification, so you do mandate as part of the onboarding for new employees. Is it something that, just because I don't know, is it something that existing employees have to go through every year the same way that we have to go through a conflict of interest? And if not, I would love to see that.
We are going to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. And do you have, just a last point on this, do you have a target goal of the amount of employees that you want to train in the upcoming year?
All.
Everybody? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. And then on the Human Rights Commission part of this, I mean, we do have some of the strongest language for protection of individuals anywhere. I mean, if you look at this language, creating this office, it's beautiful. And so I was very proud to work with Councilor Edwards to uplift and amplify this work, just to protect as many people as you possibly can. And I was going to ask about the progress of the incident report and what that might look like, so thank you for answering that. And from what I can remember, I was trying my best to go and find my notes from 2019 and 2020. There was supposed to be several updates to the law where we look at pregnancy discrimination and changing the statute of limitations to match the state, so going from 180 days to 300 days. So I don't know if that had actually taken place. That was something that we were working on in 2019, but it's definitely something that we have to do if not.
I do not believe that's taken place, but I would love to connect to talk more about that.
Okay, perfect. I'll be sure to find my notes, hopefully. And then the last part of all of this is just around domestic workers. The state changed their discrimination laws. So normally you need 6 employees, but the city hasn't changed their law to reflect the state changes. So domestic workers should also be included in all of this, but happy to connect.
Thank you so much.
That's all I have, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Coletta. Councilor Lara, you have the floor. Ms. Cora, it's on.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And thank you to the administration for being here today. I'm really excited to be talking about the work that you're doing. This is something that's incredibly important, also part of my work, you know, hearing you talk about the teams and the training. This is what my office did when I was at the Boston Public Health Commission. And I was one of the trainers and worked in the executive office doing racial justice and health equity work. Worked with Dr. Atia Martin before she came to City Hall. And so, you know, this was 10 years ago. And in the Office for Racial Justice and Health Equity, we always talked about how we wanted the model that we had used at the Boston Public Health Commission to be used and recreated in other city agencies. And so I'm really happy to see what you're doing. So I have one specific question for the Human Rights Commission before I ask the question for the Equity and Inclusion Office. I'm assuming that a lot of the work that you do is complaint-based. Is that correct? Is all of the work that you do complaint-based?
Yes and no. We do a lot of like initiatives like the digital divide, so we'll look at more of like a systemic thing, systemic issues, while also listening from our residents, and that's why we have the intake form and the anonymous incident report. So that part is complaint-based, and the other's more of the systemic issues in Boston.
Okay. And so thank you for answering that question. One of the things that we've seen recently in the last few years is an incredible increase in white supremacist rhetoric, white supremacist violence, neo-Nazis, infiltration inside of our police department, inside of our city, right? We've seen, and unfortunately, you know, the country is still mourning what we just saw happen in Buffalo, New York, just less than a week ago. We can assume that there's going to be an uptick and that the work of your office is going to increase and that you're going to have to be responsive to that as we kind of dig deeper into it. We've seen neo-Nazi groups standing outside of Boston Common, right? Like they're here. And so I'm curious.
Speaking to the mic, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious about the size of your budget. And I know that, you know, it's mostly on personnel services because if you're mostly doing complaint-based work, you need the people to respond to those. And so can you tell me a little bit about how, if at all, your office is preparing for, the uptick that we're sure to see?
For right now, we are trying to figure out an answer to that question.
Okay.
And trying to figure out what can we do. Does that look like an anti-hate coalition? Because we've done some research on, for example, the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, where they've started a massive anti-hate coalition which involves law enforcement and educators and academia to help figure out what to do.
Yep.
So that is something we are definitely thinking about and trying to work through right now. And I am open and willing to meet with anyone I can to receive any kind of suggestions or recommendations. But to answer your question, I do not have a definite answer to that.
That's fine. Let's talk about law enforcement. I'm assuming that the Human Rights Commission covers everything except the Boston Police Department, right? They have their own internal processes for that kind of discrimination. Or do those kind of complaints come into you as well?
What are you referring to? I'm sorry.
Any human rights violation, right? You have this intake form.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that covers the entire city of Boston, city departments, right? But not the Boston Police Department, that they have their own process by which they respond to those kind of complaints.
Thank you. OPAT is more responsible for that. Stephanie Everett and I have had multiple conversations around what our partnership can be, but OPAT has been sort of in charge of that.
And you have the staffing in your office to manage that kind of collaboration in the,
Those are hoped recommended budget requests around staffing, because the infrastructure right now is not there.
So it is included in your budget?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. That is what that was my question. Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So about the Office of the Cabinet, I love the work that you're doing. I think it's amazing, and I know that it's having an impact on our programs and the outright where mostly what I'm hearing is that the work that the office is doing is having an impact on our outward-facing programs, right? So that the work that every city department is doing that is interfacing with constituents is being equitable. Is there any plan for an internal audit, right? I want to talk about structural racism at City Hall. Is there any plan? And the reason why I say that is because that's how the work started at BPHC. It was with a massive internal audit that showed, it was basically an equity assessment. All of our policies, every practice, hiring, procurement, all of it, right? It kind of dug in deep. And so is there any plan or any financial resources that are necessary to make that happen?
So the internal piece, absolutely. We have engaged in the conversation. We have not engaged in the conversation of what a full-on, all departments, all cabinet audit would look like. We are starting with a resource map, to your point, of there is a plethora of resources and opportunities in here that are just not making it to our communities. And so we are starting with sort of a resource map of what internal and external opportunities are there to build asset and wealth in communities. If we can get to an audit in FY23, I would love to see it, and I will do whatever it takes to identify the funds to do that. But that is something that we're definitely going to engage in.
Is there any considerations that you can make in terms of offering something to the city council before this budget season is over? I think, I think we're going to find that there are women in the same position as men who are being paid less, that they're we got to kick our own tires, right? And so is there anything by way of, bringing in someone X, Y, and Z that you can offer the city council that isn't already on your budget before the budget season is up?
Can you rephrase the question? You're asking if there is an individual in the cabinet that can work with the council to do this?
If you were to say that we are going to take on that kind of equity assessment, an internal audit of City Hall, and could you offer a overall maybe skeleton plan and budget request to the city council before this budget season is over to say we can bring in this consultant, it might cost this much for an internal audit, and does your office have the capacity to do it? You might not have the capacity to do it in FY23, right? So
Right.
my question is more of, can you make those considerations? And can you say, yes, FY23, no, FY24, right?
Gotcha. I would love to sit down with Lori and a couple of the other staff to do this, to consider this.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. No further questions.
Thank you, Councilor. Chief, I love that you said you would like to do that. And to piggyback on Councilor's point, I actually did file a hearing order for to explore equity in the city of Boston. And in that order, it also specifies that I am asking for an audit of the entire city. It also specifies that we want to build on the existing dashboard to be able to monitor progress in the work, in equity work, to be able to actually do a full assessment of the entire city, hence all budget sessions now, right? All hearing sessions now, we are requesting an equity packet. I am currently working with BU and Dr. Olara from Harvard to actually come in and testify on that. So, and I've also contacted your office, and I've spoken with you about this, and I've asked you to work with you directly on this audit / implementing metrics / building on the dashboard to measure. And then I began with saying racism was declared public health crisis a few years ago. What are we doing about it? So I look forward. I'm happy to hear you say that. Hopefully it's not a surprise. Hopefully you remember that piece, the conversation we had, and we can continue on that in the equity hearing as well as beyond, outside of budget season as well. Thank you. Councilor, Lujan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the administration for being here. I want to congratulate Lori and
It's a long name.
Excuse me?
Oh, right here?
Yes.
Oh, Susie.
Susie, sorry. Yeah, Susie on your interim role. I'm excited to work with all of you. I guess there's been a lot of reorganization in your cabinet, right? Yeah. Are you losing any FTEs as a result of reshuffling, or are you making it all work, or what's happening there?
I should have addressed that in the presentation. Thank you. So if you looked at our budget, and you're probably shocked to see that, I forgot the actual number, but it's in the millions that we are losing. It's just because those two units are moving under Chief Ido's cabinet. So the work of supplier diversity and BRJP are have already moved. That was one of the first things that we did with Senior Advisor Selena Barrios-Milner and Chief Ido to make sure that work was under his purview.
Okay.
Losing FTEs, no. If anything, we are absorbing some FTEs of departments that are no longer going to be, like the diversity office. There are 3 FTEs there. One is moving under the HR department to ensure that we will have a chief diversity officer that is sort of leading the work of diversifying and retaining workforce. And then 2 are coming under the core team of the shall you approve.
Okay, and where are you in terms of fulfilling the outstanding FTEs?
Oh boy. We are definitely in staffing season right now. It's going to take a second.
What is the main obstacle because this is, the work that you're doing is incredibly important, right? Yes. And we want to make sure that you have the people and the manpower to be able to do the work. So what are the roadblocks there?
The fact that I came into a staff of 1, and that one person was not the person in charge of the admin and finance. So we're hiring that person just now. Once we have that person, we're hoping that it will be a lot easier for us to bring people in.
Okay. There are some departments in the city of Boston that have been hiring their own, either diversity or equity person, or that have their own. And I think that's actually pretty encouraging. I'm curious about what is the work of your office to ensure consistency and continuity of vision for what equity and anti-racist policies look like in our city and in our city departments and in different cabinets? Like, what is that work gonna look like?
Yeah, no, I'm excited to say that we've began that work. It's 5 different angles, of course, right? But about a month ago.
And also, if you can list, do you know the ones that, like the departments and that have their own, like either diversity or equity, person?
I will get that roster to you. We do have it actually.
Okay, this is a formal request of the chair that I'm making for that list.
Perfect.
Okay.
But yeah, and I will say it's primarily diversity focused. So like in BPD, this is diversity officer in, oh my God, fire, there's a newly hired, but it's diversity focused. Just about a month ago,
Will you be reeling them into your shop?
We had our good question. That is not the current plan.
And I don't mean like formally like reporting to you, but like a framework.
Yes.
Where you are like working like together in deep partnership.
We had our first working group session where that was the expectation set that we need to align in definition and in efforts, et cetera. And we did a similar thing with, there's a lot of different DEI committees spread out throughout departments, which is just staff. We also convened that space to ensure that there's alignment happening, because to your point, it's encouraging, but it's not aligned right now.
Okay. And you said that there are about 4,000 people who've completed the real training. Is that right? Out of how many employees? Like 20?
So I think we say 18, is it 18? 18,000?
18,000.
It just sometimes
it
fluctuates.
Right.
So 4,300 have completed.
Are there departments that have been better at completing it then? Do we have that data as well in terms of what departments have been completing that training? Can you, for another formal request via the chair, to get that data in terms of which departments? Because it'd be interesting if there's a correlation between the departments that are failing to complete the training and the departments that don't have their own equity or diversity in-house person, because maybe that can be a formal budget request if we see that there's some overlap there, that we are having more problem with completion in departments where there is not this singular person devoted to thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion.
The only sort of theory that we've been able to develop is it's been really hard to get to folks that like are working outside, because and I would argue that like I need the leadership to be trained first, but I would say that that's sort of just like been a actual difficult challenge to get folks to sit behind a computer for 3 hours if that's not sort of their line of work. But yes, we definitely have that data, and we'll make sure to share it over again.
Are there departments that you believe need their own diversity or equity point?
So again, I failed to say this earlier. One of the long-term goals, and that's why I said earlier that we're hoping to build a pipeline with this fellowship, is that each cabinet will have equity ambassador, equity officers that are reporting directly to whoever the chief of equity is, and I report directly to chief of staff and mayor. The idea there being that whatever we program or policy rubric standards we develop are being ingrained cabinet by cabinet through this pipeline that we're developing that will end up in a equity officers program that are staffed folks paid doing that work in streets, in housing, et cetera, versus one chief of equity sort of overseeing the larger piece, which I would argue is one of the reasons why it's been a little bit hard to move the work forward.
Okay. I guess I have a question that I have now for the Human Rights Commission. And I want to commend the start of the Human Rights Commission. We know that there was a gap where it was not, being used. And so really incredible that we can bring it back and be doing the work. I wonder if you all have done surveys about naming, right? Human Rights Commission, a lot of folks, if they have a complaint about discrimination in the workplace or discrimination in another venue, Human Rights Commission doesn't necessarily click, oh, that's where I go, right? So what about calling it the Civil Rights Commission or doing some internal study to see what actually makes sense? Because when I look at the complaint numbers that we're getting, and knowing the issues that exist in our city and in City Hall when it comes to discrimination and when it comes to racism, I would expect those complaint numbers to be a lot higher than what they are. And I'm wondering if there's an accessibility issue, if there's a language issue, and so have you thought about renaming and taking a hard look at how we are, how the Human Rights Commission is presenting itself to the outside world?
We are definitely in the process of that now, especially again with the new administration, me being new to the role. Yes, the name has come up a lot because it is, well, human rights, is that like human trafficking, or like what does that mean? So that is definitely something that we've been thinking about, along with just rebranding and how do we get the word out there more? How do we get more individuals to know that our intake form is there, our anonymous report is there? I have not thought about surveys, so I thank you for recommending that. Again, I'm open to suggestions or recommendations how we could, I feel like we're in a very unique position right now where we could work on those and make a bigger impact, and that's exactly what I want to do. So I'm hoping that we can connect and figure out how to better serve the residents.
Thank you. Relatedly, you know, I think the Human Rights Commission, when you were reporting the numbers, and it seems like, and I'll allow you to answer as well, the metric for success is referrals. And to me, that is just a low bar. Where we have so much happening in City Hall with employees who are, you know, not getting promoted, with people who have a hard time, you know, even entering the job market here. You know, so I'd like to see a more reshaping of what HRC, like, you know, hopefully an evolution of the name, but also internal versus external, right? Because I do think that the mission of being complaint driven is important, but also you have an important systemic role to play to really study the policies and practices and patterns that are really that contribute to structural racism in our systems here. And so I think just being so, you know, referral driven is not living out the full potential at all of what HRC can be and what the vision for a powerful commission like this can be. I'll also say that I think it's, you know, I think there's room for HRC to be able to fight for what you can do without referral to an, you know, trying to get on, MCAD. The majority of the people who file complaints with MCAD are Boston residents. Right. And I think that there's ability for us to maybe work in partnership with MCAD for us to be able to be more aggressive with the complaints that we do get. I have other questions too around, like, especially how we are outwardly facing with community, for folks to know that we're a resource, but I'll save them because I heard the timer go off, so I'll save those for second round. Thank you.
Councilor, thank you, Councilor Lujan. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the equity entourage here. You know, in many ways, the work that you all do is, in my personal opinion, the most important here in the city of Boston, considering our deeply rooted racial injustice that continues to persist. And I do appreciate the early efforts that have been made around, you know, community conversations and dialogues across the city so that we can begin to heal. But the fact of the matter is that we're never going to get there because there's still so much healing that still needs to be done. And in order for us to heal, we have to acknowledge that racism is a problem in Boston. And I just still feel like we struggle with that. So I'm encouraged by the efforts that are being made. So I am also going to encourage you all to seize this moment, right? And act with urgency. And if now is the time to be bold, right? We have a new administration, new leadership, and, you know, we have a can-do attitude, so anything is possible. And you also have a council that is eager for that. work. So see us as partners and as disruptors and agitators and people who will also be holding you accountable to that. So I just have a few questions. And if you could just talk to me a little bit about lived experience and how that is informing some of your work. And while I do appreciate diversity in terms of just like racial diversity, I just want to name that oftentimes there's a level of privilege that we all carry into spaces regardless of what we carry and what role that we are here to represent. So I often see that those who are living profound injustices don't have the this whole idea of being an inclusive cabinet. They don't see themselves reflected in that work. So can you just talk to me a little bit about the work that you all are going to be doing to ensure that, and when you think about inclusion, it's not just about race, that we're also looking at profound lived experience and poverty in particular?
Councilor, thank you for that question. When I felt the need to add that piece, because what this cabinet is going to do really, 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 really well is build trust. Like that, if there is one thing we are going to do really well is prioritize building trust with communities that trust isn't there yet. I come from a family that was like middle fingers up to anything government related. And I think the resource, so I'll answer your question directly. The resource map idea that I was talking about earlier is because we have a theory that we, again, have all these resources, have all these opportunities that are not making it to all communities, and the loudest folks are able to tap, loudest, most comfortable people that are perhaps educated or whatever are able to tap into these resources. The hope with the resource map is that we're able to identify who is not, right? Is it folks living in specific zip codes? Is it single parents raising kids? And that, like, I'm hoping to get to that level of granularity to be able to focus. When I think of equity, it's like the last person of first approach, right? Like, who is not receiving those services that we have? But I'm gonna stop because I don't wanna take your time. Is that answering your specific question?
We're getting there. But I want to do follow-up, right? Let's just follow the thread here for a little bit. Here in the city of Boston, there's also a lot of tension between different racial groups, right? There's this us versus them mentality. And can you just talk to us about the work that your cabinet is going to be doing around healing and bringing, specifically, I'll just name it, the Latino community and the Black community has always been at odds. And so I'm just curious, as you start thinking about this work, what are some of your ideas to kind of bring these worlds together?
I would be happy to answer this question, and also I think this is literally the job description that Lori and I wrote together. So Lori, if you want to take this, let me know. If not, I'm happy to answer this.
We can start off.
Okay. So healing is it's literally written in the job description that Lori and I wrote together, right? Like somebody who's focused on like how do we do this piece around healing when we're not doctors, right? That is not the infrastructure that we have in the cabinet. I think something simple is we are physically moving offices with an effort to put the 4 departments that are the advancement offices, right? I'm going to say them quickly, LGBTQ, BMA, MOYA, MOA, together because there is such a thing as a Black man who is gay and an immigrant. And so we have to have these hard, difficult, important conversations around identities. And so that is going to happen internally first as we build the habit. And I'm looking forward to the day in which we can start extending this into community in a way that is protecting our most vulnerable, rather than sort of opening up a space that could potentially harm the communities that we're here to protect.
So the reality is it's difficult, right? I'm a straight shooter. Like, this is difficult work to do because, to your point, Counselor, there has been so much tension. So building off of what Chief has also mentioned, part of this is really about creating spaces, to your point about healing, where people can actually be heard. Most oftentimes, I've lived the experience where people come into spaces and they just say what they feel, and that's how they feel, and then it's like, okay, take it or leave it, right? Whereas I understand that and appreciate that space too. I do think there's another space that we will build and create that will help to get us to appreciating differences, but then really thinking about how those differences help to create this city, our city, and then how we try to move a city forward. But it is very difficult, and it is something that I think is not a one and done. I think it takes a lot of different types of ways and spaces that we come together, that we learn together, that we understand our history and who we are, but come together to try to move that effort forward.
Thank you. Chair, can you just give me a time check?
You can have one more minute.
Okay, thank you. So I'm encouraged, and I like that. I think for me, I'm a visual learner, so I do appreciate the PowerPoint, but I'm also a realist, right? As much as I have these idealistic views of what could happen, I would really like to see some metrics and some outcomes that are being laid out, like, in the first quarter, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. As a result of doing this, this will be what we'll be able to show for our work. I didn't see that in the presentation, and I know this is aspirational, but I think at some point, as we continue to have these discussions, it would be good to kind of have some numbers attached to this work. And then the last thing that I'll say with my little bit of time left, and then I'll come back for a second round if we're allowed that, is that while I do appreciate the pilot program for the accents on diplomas, I lost I'm Mejia. That's why nobody knows how to pronounce my last name, because it was never written correctly. I'm just curious, why is it a pilot if it's just a little accent thing? Like, why do you have to pilot it in 3 schools, and why can't it just be rolled out and just made? Like, is it a money? Can't afford it? Like, what's up?
The short answer is, when this young lady said this to us, the diplomas as a city were sort of already in process of being printed. And so, yes.
You didn't answer my question. Why can't you roll it out to more than 3 schools? Why does it have to be a pilot?
Because they were already in the printing process. And when I spoke with the assistant superintendent, I forgot her title, sorry, Becky Schuster, working with the guidance office, who is Office of 2 for some reason in BPS Central, they do not have the capacity to do this in sort of like large scale of almost 4,000 students graduating this year.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Flaherty has a hard stop in about 10 minutes. Is it okay that I allow him to go first? Thank you. Councilor Flaherty, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues. Just be very brief. Thank you for the work that you're doing, all of you. And I just wanted to maybe connect to talk just a little bit about the partnerships that you have with other departments. I know that there's a partnership with the Boston Police Department as it pertains to the referrals that they send over. I assume that there's a partnership maybe with the Boston Public Schools as others. So if you can maybe just touch on the partnerships around referrals. And there was an incident recently where there was Nazi flyers that had been distributed at a local school. It was the 3rd time that they had been distributed since September, but it wasn't until the victims in that matter that were mentioned in those flyers. It wasn't until they went to the police department was there actual real action, because there wasn't any action taken from the Boston Public Schools. So maybe just touch on the partnerships that you guys have with the various departments and how things can get going. Maybe it's a referral type of situation, or maybe it's not a referral, but and again, appreciate the work that's going into this and the budget funds. And then one follow-up question is on the Black Male Advancement operating budget. It seems as though it's sufficient to support at least the personnel side, but does it have the appropriate resources for it to be effective? And those are my two basic questions, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think for the, thank you for the partnerships question, both questions. The partnership piece, unfortunately, we haven't been able to move fast enough to restructure HRC. Once we do that, our outreach is going to be much better than it is now. I say this to say that I hate the fact that this had been going on since September and we just learned about it, right? And it even made it to HRC because folks don't know that this is something that this office can and will do. So I'm gonna make sure that as we sort of restructure, the moment we start with outreach, we are working with you all so that you also see us as a resource. As for the Black Male Advancement Office, I think I'm laughing because I just had a conversation of like, we need this much. And I was like, well, you need way more than that. What do you, like, no number is gonna solve this problem in year one. I will say that as I'm inside and I'm learning how things move here, I believe that between the operating budget, Director Frank Farrow will be able to do amazing work with the current budget that we propose forward. And same for the other offices. I know that Moya, who's been running, the current budget doesn't even reach $2 million, and they're already doing excellent work. I'm never going to say no to more money, obviously, but I'm seeing Moya do excellent work with less than $2 million budget at the moment.
Gotcha. And so my suggestion would be that, and maybe it's an initiative from your department and respectively all of your departments, is that you send a memo out to every single department, letting them know who you are and what you do and how you can be helpful. Because a lot of it is, folks, believe it or not, in a big municipality like Boston, we're sort of in separate silos and no one sort of knows who is doing what and who's in whose lane, and or there might be some turf issues where people feel that that's what they do. And so I would suggest, and just given my experiences, that maybe a memo goes out across the city to every department saying, hey, just want to let you know we're over here and this is who we are and this is what we do, and we want to, and it might be an opportunity to create some. You talk about Boston's success stories. They're all based on partnerships, right? And you guys could be creating a partnership within city government through all the departments. So that would just be a sort of a friendly suggestion that I offer. But again, I thank you for your time and talents and the work you're doing, and happy to support your efforts. Thank you to the Madam Chair and also to my colleagues for their indulgence in allowing me to be able to make my 12:30 if I'm able to get there in time. Thank you and God bless. Take care.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Worrell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel for all your great work that you do in the city of Boston and trying to change the system and changing the structure to produce the outcomes that we want to see here in the city of Boston. I want to also give a quick shout out to the great press conference today. 21 black men here in the city of Boston got appointed to help advance, black men and boys here in the city. So great work that you guys are doing. One of my questions is kind of piggybacking on what Councilor Flaherty was saying is, in terms of collaboration, are you guys working with the budget department, and how are you guys working with the budget department to make sure that equity is being seen, in the capital plan, the operating plan, and that, also piggybacking on what Councilor Mejia is saying, is the performance driven. What are the performance outcomes that we're trying to drive towards when we're putting all these investments in our schools, in our programs, in our initiatives? And is there any tool that we use to measure those outcomes?
Yeah. Short answer is yes, the partnership has officially begun. That sounds so silly. Definitely in touch with James Williamson from the budget office, and also Casey Brock Wilson, who's running the ARPA project. I think that actually answers your question. But what we're looking at is, in even just something as simple, it's not, but the budget proposal piece, when there's due on January 14th or whenever it is, there is one question around what is the equity impact of this investment you're making. we are already addressing how we are going to get a lot deeper in that question to ensure that we're asking specific questions of when possible, because it won't always be possible, because when it's citywide, it may be harder to proactively track zip codes whereas reactively. But we're going to be asking questions around, can you identify specific zip codes that this program is going to be targeting? And once we build the infrastructure, I see a place where we are sort of serving as advisors directly with each of the departments as they're setting performance goals for whatever specific programs are running. One specific example that we're exploring right now between the Office of Black Male Advancement and Housing, we met with Chief Dillon, who's ready to have the hard conversation of all this money is going into housing. Can we have a conversation around how much we can actually commit to Black families or specific zip codes, et cetera? And Frank has been part of that conversation. It's only one initial conversation, but that's just to show you that there is will. We just need to structure it a lot more.
Awesome. And is there anyone in the department that's focused on like performance of all those departments and those investments, or is that just taken up on by the whole cabinet? And if there's not one person focused on performance, do you feel that we should have someone who's focused on performance, you know, looking into these investments that's being made in our departments?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact title. The answer is one of the staff. I requested for one person, seeing a world in which we're going to need more than that. But for FY23 is really who's going to be partnering directly with the budget office to ensure that we're setting these goals with Do It. Do It has an office, that's really focused on setting these metrics, and we're going to be partnering with them so that as they are setting these performance goals, they're also building equity into the work. But I will say, Do It has a specific office, and I'm so sorry that I'm blanking on the name, that is initiating this work, and we are partnering with them as well. But one person that I requested in the proposal, and I'm so sorry, I think it was like Director of Strategic Partnerships or something like that. That person is really going to be the one helping drive some of that internal strategy and collaboration work.
Awesome. And then in the 2021 executive order, require that every department must develop and submit a plan for racial and gender conscious goals and procurement. Is your department working with other departments to create these plans?
That is Chief Idawu's particular work. And him and I, he's constantly teaching me, I'm constantly working with him on like how we can actually do this together, but that's sort of like under his purview.
Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no further questions right now, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Worrell. Councilor Braden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, there I am. Thank you all for being here this morning. So, I'm just a few questions. It says in your presentation, you know, how do you anonymous incident reports? So, how do you handle an anonymous incident report when you don't have actually anybody to talk to directly?
So in our anonymous incident report, obviously the name is, you know, you don't have to put that in. You put a description of what happened, where it happened, what do you believe was the protected class associated with the incident. For those that do not want to be contacted, we're going to use those as data points, more or less, to see if there's any clusters. So if there's 15 anonymous report about the one Dunkin' Donuts by City Hall, well, something's going on around that. So while we're using it to help individuals that want to be contacted, for those that don't want to, we're going to use it on the systematic issue to see if we find any clusters in our city.
Yeah, and I come from Northern Ireland, and we have a flags and emblems law, you know, that you don't display in the workplace flags or emblems that are offensive to people in a particular group. Do we have, in terms of, do we look at hostile work environments and think about, you know, somebody mentioned Nazi flyers or graffiti or sexually explicit images in the workplace, or flags and emblems? You're thinking more of the Confederate flag or something like that. Do we look at that sort of in the context of a hostile work environment?
That is something to think about. I know that conversation was brought up when I had the conversation with Councilor Ferdinand regarding the neo-Nazi flags that have been flying around. I do not have a definitive answer to that, but that is a topic I do want to explore as we rebrand and figure out what exactly HRC can do and really define how we can help.
Yeah. Well, you also, the most offensive thing that comes to mind is someone putting a noose in someone's
Yes,
locker in a school.
absolutely. Yes.
That's an offence. That makes it a hostile environment. So are we addressing those sort of incidents and tracking those?
For right now, and this is because we're in the process of rebranding, if those individuals fill out an intake, that's how we know about it. And that's why reporting is such a important concept. But until people fill it out and we can try to figure out how to help them, there's nothing right now as a definitive plan, but it's in the works. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. You say you're trying to you're going to be mapping incidents of discrimination and maybe hate speech or whatever. Are you integrating reports from MCAD as well? Like, are you aggregating all that, because they probably get reports that you don't get?
Yes, so we have reached out to UMCAD to receive their complaints for the last 5 years, and that's something our research analyst is working on right now. We made a request to receive data from the last 5 years on the zip code and how many, the associated protected class. So for example, in 02131, there were 50 complaints out of that, targeted towards race. And we're working to map that out to see, again, if there's any systemic, any clusters where we are. But we have reached out to MCAD and have received that data, and that is something that I will continue to do.
So the Boston Police Department has a civil rights unit, and are you working closely? Like, one thing in our district, we've had visibly identified, easily identified Jewish folks being attacked. We've had elders in our senior housing or Asian who are afraid to leave their building. Like, are you tracking those sort of incidents with the civil rights unit at the police department as well, and working with them to try and identify ways for folks to report better?
That is something that we have asked the detectives that we met with what data they can share. For right now, we did come to the conclusion, again, it's like 3 weeks into the role for me, the first thing right off the bat was, how can we work together in referral partnership? So you track hate incidents and hate crimes. How can we help? Is there a way that you can refer those that don't want to proceed the matter in court, or that the incident does not amount to that of a crime, so we can help? Because that's their hard stop where they can't do anything after that. The next conversation is, how can we do outreach? How can we get more individuals to know that we both exist and that reporting needs to be done? And all in that comes more the conversation on what more can we do? What data can we share? How can we make a difference on a broader scale?
The other question I had is, are you working with the legal department to ensure that, we're further to Councillor Coletta's question earlier about state laws that and authorising statutes that related to domestic workers and human trafficking? Are we, I know our code needs to be updated and our statutes are not all in the binder. That's some work that has to happen. But are you working, with the legal department to identify laws and statutes that would be incorporated?
I will say that we will be working with the legal department because we do believe that our ordinance needs to be updated. So that's definitely a conversation we plan on having. But I have not initiated that yet, but I will initiate.
So the other question I had was with, and this is more from Madam Chair and the Chair of Ways and Means. I'm curious about, the union coding for the different personnel. Some of them are MYO, some of them are CDH, and some of them EXM, and What do those codes mean?
I'm assuming, oh, I don't see that. Are you referring to this document?
In the budget book, it's page 106, Personnel Department, with regard to the Office of Equity Operating Budget.
Okay. I can get with our budget analyst to be able to answer that question. I don't.
And I do believe that's HR too. That's just their class and compensation, just how they categorize the mayor's office, and appointees have a different like department code, but that's class and comps and HR, just how they categorize individuals. Because I was also looking at that too.
Yeah, because has this department, is it still under the mayor's office, or is it a separate cabinet at this point?
So by July 1st, the idea is that each department will have their own account codes under the larger equity cabinet, but each of them will have their own budgets, their own staff, etc. But right now, I think we're sort of spread out between like the disabilities is still in the human services cabinet. I think you all are still in the community engagement cabinet. It's all over the place, but by July 1st, it will be under one cabinet.
Madam Chair, could I have another second?
Yes, you may.
I have a background, I worked with elders in many years in rehabilitation, and how do you work with Age Strong to address the issue about elder abuse and physical, psychological, financial, and then particularly from working to address discrimination against LGBT seniors and housing opportunities or whatever. That generation grew up in a time where it wasn't safe to be out, and very many of them are going into their senior years, their elder years, the last years of their life, and it's a very challenging time for them. They're afraid to be. Are we working on that issue?
Age Strong has been and will be a very strong partner with us. They're not under our cabinet, but they're absolutely going to be a partner, and especially in all offices, but in this one in particular as we build it out.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. I like to begin by thanking you for your intentions on doing the work, your time, and hopefully your vigor behind this work. So the office, this cabinet, I, in my opinion, believe that is the most important one in the city of Boston, in government. This cabinet should set precedence to the work across the board, how we lead in each department, how we as a city are leading in equity. And the term equity is used to the point where the definition seems nebulous, as though it's some sort of mystified, diluted, whatever. And then the reason why I believe that the Office of Equity or the cabinet is the most important is because every single politician runs their campaign based on the narratives that supposedly the Cabinet of Equity propagates. And I'm going to say, and I'm going to preface my questions, or I'm going to stage how I'm going to ask you these questions by saying, I don't think that we all have the answers, and I understand that some of you or most of you in this cabinet are new, and then there is the issue around staffing and capacity. What I would ask of this cabinet is a sense of urgency. And I believe that it's so serious that the majority of the council is leading their work, right, with that. The majority of the council are infuriated with the level of inefficiency when it comes to the so-called equity lens that this city is supposedly leading by. And again, this doesn't speak to this administration. Everybody's new, I get it. And we should allow time for the transformation that we so often say. We should allow time for the work. I don't see the urgency, not in the tone, and certainly not in the work. So before we even go into anything else, I've offered and we filed the Councilor Jen on how to use bonds, because we've heard the administration say how filthy rich Boston is, and yet black and brown boys die in the city. We've heard the administration talk about the wealth and how beautiful and how great Boston is, and we love the city too. We think it's great. We think it has all the potential to be able to ensure that there's quality of life for everyone. I wonder if the first question I have for you is if you're actually surveying your listening sessions with the community for demographics and location. Where are the people coming from?
I see. Sorry, I just want to clarify. The listening tour I was referring to was internal only, staff.
Uh-huh.
It was not outside. It was not external listening tour. I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Who have you talked to? Do you have that documentation?
So, I see. So for the first phase of the listening tour was every staff member in the cabinet, and then I went to the cabinet chiefs of each of the different cabinets, and that's sort of as far as I went. And now we're building the
We
cabinet.
did not document those names?
Yeah,
and
of course.
demographics? Please submit them by email.
As in the demographics of the leadership of each of the cabinets?
Yes, everyone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, of course.
Allow me to ask the question, and then let's go back and forth, okay? Everyone that you've spoken with and gotten your feedback, I'm going to tell you that this is extremely emotional, and I am going to ask for your forgiveness in how forceful I'm going to be in my questions, because I'm just going to be sick. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? As the quote goes. And everyone here, I heard my colleagues talk about, I'm tired of, like as Councilor Lujan said before, I'm tired of hearing the word equity, and it means nothing, right? It absolutely means nothing. The conversation is just completely diluted, and this presentation thus far has felt as though there's no sense of urgency behind the issue. And so I'm going to be just really transparent with you and say that we need to be able to stand up to Boston and go back to our children, to my black sons at home, and be able to say that we're doing the work. And what I'm seeing here in this presentation, and I'm almost so close to feeling like I need to bring back this hearing once again, to really go and comb through what's happening in this office. And listening to your plans and listening, I have a list, that you're gonna do trainings, wonderful. I have that you're gonna do this Equity and Inclusion Fellow, great. BPS portal and more trainings. When we're talking about equity, we want to work together in this, and we want to talk about how we're actually auditing. I held an equity training, and the departments and everyone was scrambling around. Some people came and left and didn't even stay. It was equity. It was a hearing on equity, and people came and left. I go home to my sons in Roxbury, and I have to worry about what gang or whatever affiliation or whatever's gonna happen, if there's gonna be a shooting, if he's gonna be safe. I have to worry about where I'm gonna send him to school. I have to worry about housing. I have to worry about my elders. Excuse me a moment. If you're, sorry, allow me to speak without the, I'm really asking you for me to allow me to speak. And so I'm saying to you, all of this pain is connected to the people at home. You look around, how many people do you see in here? Not enough. Not enough. Our colleagues, and they have agendas and they have schedules, that's fine. But how important is this to the city of Boston? That's the question. Everyone knows that every hearing that I've been holding, I've been asking for equity questions, or I've been asking for responses, and they come back and we know the answers. That's not your fault. I get it. What I'm looking for is a sense of urgency and sort of collaboration in a real sincere way, that we can actually sit down and come up with these strategies. Because fire department is almost 80% white. Because BPD is almost 70% white. Because BPDA is about 80% white. Because the cabinet is also not as diverse as it should be. Because the city of Boston, every single department, exceptions to human rights and equity, right? With exceptions to that, I think YEE is also diverse. Other than that, we hire majority white, we pay men more, we pay everybody else, we pay all the whites more, and then we say, equity, equity, transformation, yeah, right. So that's my comment, and I'm gonna stop going on and on because I'm just like emotional and upset. And I'm asking you for us to start over. This is not it. I'm asking you for us to start over. I'm not even gonna go down my questions because I want my colleagues to go to their round two, and then I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to come back to this. But this is an outrage. This is an absolute outrage, and I know, and I ask you again to forgive me because I know that I can't properly assess the work because you just got here. I can't properly assess your implementation because you just got here. But I would have expected more urgency. I would have expected that there was a sense of, again, vigor behind your work. Or at least I ask you for that in the future. We're gonna go to round two. And again, listening to everybody's comments and the way we're not answering, we don't have the answers. I'm sitting here and I'm boiled up, you know? And you have to understand what this means for the Black plight in Boston. Let's take a recess. 5 minutes, please. We're back. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us. We will continue now to our second round, and if the panelists will bear with me, I will read my questions into record, and I'm going to ask that you respond via email, just in the interest of time. So my first question is, if you say that the first step in your race equity leadership training is a learning session about overcoming unconscious bias, what materials and resources do you use for this? What policies are you putting in place to combat these unconscious bias that we have? How much money has been actually budgeted for these training sessions? And if you're not typing fast enough, no worries, I can submit them to you. Perhaps, maybe just, I'm a simple person, but when we talk about unconscious bias, it seems that we often don't talk about conscious bias. So it seems that often we don't talk about it. So what systems or programs do you have in place to combat conscious bias? Step 2 of the session speaks to laying the foundation of racial equity. What would you say that looks like? And that question, actually, I'll come back to in my second round, because I want that answered here. Step 3 session is about transforming our systems. What would you say that looks like exactly? I worry that instead of transforming systems, that we're merely incorporating more diverse cast of folks into the existing systems. Do you see a difference between transformation and incorporation? And if so, how do we make sure we are doing the former and not the latter? In 2019, you published a document entitled Racial Equity, Resiliency, Cities at the Forefront. What does that mean for a city to be resilient? I've often thought of individuals having to be resilient, but that it often resulted of being met with undue oppression and marginalization. Does a resilient city act to lessen or eliminate the resiliency that many of our residents have to exercise minute by minute? One of your partners is Rockefeller Foundation. Do you think it is possible to fight for equity and against racism while partnering with one of the richest foundations in the world? I ask this because there are concepts out there known as movement capture and controlled opposition. Are you aware of these concepts, and do you ever worry that they are encroaching on the work that all of us are trying to do? And then the question about, how are you serving, and if you're moving forward with listening sessions, community listening sessions, how are you actually documenting demographics and location? Of your procured vendors, you have one MBE, and I know that it's owned by a Latina woman, which is, I forget, actually I have it right here. Archipelago Strategist Group, but the other two are one out of state and one out of the city. They're not local, so your majority of vendors, although a total of 3, are not local. What are we doing about changing that? And is the Office of Equity prioritizing the most vulnerable? And then my other question is, who is the most vulnerable population in Boston, and how do you prioritize the most vulnerable? How will you work to ensure that the city leads by example? Will you work with the council in the equity hearing that's been filed by Councilor Anderson to build a dashboard that actually implements metrics to measure and monitor progress with equity in the city of Boston? Do you find that $6,000 is sufficient for language access? And I want you to tell me exactly what your collaboration is with BPD in terms of how that works, not just not just them submitting data, but as well as like the actual protocol that you use in order to collaborate with them. Do you have any plans to work on truth and reconciliation in the city of Boston? And I'll stop by asking you, and I would actually like an answer from all three of you. What does reparation mean? And do you agree with reparations for Black people in Boston? Anyone can start first.
We're answering that last question. As somebody who is not Black, so I have had to learn through friends, family members, books. I believe reparations to be, one, an acknowledgement of harms done in the past, and I would claim present, followed by putting resources where they need to go to address those harms of the past and present. And do I agree with reparations? Yes.
You agree. What does it mean again? Sorry.
First, an acknowledgement of harms done in the past and present, followed by, I'm sure there's many steps in between, but followed by putting resources where those harms were done.
Thank you.
Sorry. Not to sound like a broken record, so I'm not gonna try to use the same wording, but the way I saw it, it was, again, acknowledging the past, but a fix for the future. That's how I see it. I see it as a fix for a future, and that's why I say I agree with it, and that's why I'm saying it's a fix. Not a solid fix, but it's a step, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Reparations to me, yes, is a couple of things. So certainly there's the acknowledgement, but with an acknowledgement also comes an apology. Something has to happen in between acknowledging what we know to be wrong and then an apology that also accepts your portion in doing a wrong, right? Then from apology, it goes to understanding how we right those wrongs. And again, not an easy fix at all, but how do we acknowledge what has been wrong by way of history, by way of education, and then working toward a pathway forward inclusive of economic restoration and other ways of restoration. I always call it mind, body, soul, spirit. So it's much deeper than just dollars and cents. So it's about how does an entire person, entire body of people become restored, healed, and transformed into where we are today.
Thank you, Chief. We have to go to our in-person public testimony, and I ask that you take a seat with us, please, so that you're facing the panelists. Yeah, if you could just move aside so that you were not, yeah, thank you. Please state your name, affiliation, address if you choose, and you can begin.
I'd like to lead with, I'm here full of anxiety, as most Black Americans are at this time, because we don't know when there's going to be a mass murder and against us with no real outpour, outcry, or resolve for it. Honorable Chair and panelists and City Council. My name is Aziza Robinson Goodnight. I'm a foundational Black American, not a POC, not a BIPOC person whose lineage on this land outdates the transatlantic slave trade but includes the enslavement of Black people. I'm a Bostonian whose family has been here for multiple generations and whose land has been taken by urban renewal. I'm a voter. I'm a project director for our local reparations campaign. I'm the chair of the Frederick Douglass Sculpture Project, a member of P3 Review Committee, and a daughter of the Black arts community. In full disclosure, I'm very interested in urging for racial equity in Boston and will be directly addressing the urgency and state of emergency in the Black community. I am also a parent at the Advent School in Beacon Hill, and I'm here today to honor the thoughtful efforts of the 6th grade class and compelling writing of these students who I've been able to spend multiple occasions with over the past few weeks before they testified today. They have spent time looking at examples of reparations that have been given in the US for Japanese American internment, for Tuskegee syphilis experiment, and others. And then the Congregational Bill, H.R. 40. They watched a video of Ta-Nehisi Coates testifying last year before Congress, and the kids burst out into applause, as well as more specific detail on reparations in Evanston, Cambridge, and Boston. The students worked on letters to city council members, aiming to make the case for why reparations are necessary, as well as specific reparations they think should happen. Please accept this statement into public record. If Boston is to embody the phrase Boston Strong, then the city government must be strong enough to deliver the sentiments and support to its most underappreciated citizens for its participation in one of the greatest injustices against humanity, the transatlantic slave trade. If Boston is to ever begin reckoning its centuries-old economic apartheid, it must acknowledge and rectify the places for where the hate stems from. The 6th grade students at the Advent School spent thoughtful time creating solutions to this problem as active citizens. The city can create space to allow us as a community to do the same. This statement is an expression of my demand for funding from the City of Boston to be used for a reparations commission and a racial reconciliation fund for African Americans affected by racism and discrimination in the City of Boston. These brief examples are not meant to be taken by the committee or the council to be used as their own, but to work in partnership with community. A racial reconciliation fund, these are examples for a racial reconciliation fund. Home and land ownership assistance, similar to Councilor Anderson's rent-to-own proposal. Bridging the economic racial gap, a progressive research and solution creation. Dual language immersion programs for Black Bostonians who are born with one language. We are being far left behind because we do not have another language and nobody is saying anything. This is a handicap for us because we are socially and economically being held back for many jobs in this city. Historic Preservation Fund for research and education on Black history and the history of Black Americans in the city. Black Boston replacement and retention funds designed to allow generations of involuntary displaced Black families to get back into the city and into the spaces where they have generational memories. As we create a fund for the City Hall's workers, we should also be thinking about the many families that have been displaced from the city. Education advancement funds that support not just a bachelor's, because that means nothing when applying for jobs as a Black person anywhere. But there needs to be education advancement funds that increase the ability of master's and doctoral program admissions, and also research degrees. We do not need to do 4-year or 6-year, 10-year degrees. We can be researchers and certified researchers and advance ourselves. But also education about the Roxbury Master Strategic Plan to inform us of thoughtful development that includes all. I'm aware and a survivor of the struggles within the African American community, especially as they pertain to social justice. African Americans have lived in Boston before its founding as a city, and thousands of others who have built this country and arrived and enslaved people. Boston must recognize for a racist past. I'll hurry up.
I'll allow you another minute to wrap up.
Thank you. And creating an image of Black existence as a danger, and for pushing the agenda for racial bias in plain sight. The most underappreciated communities have shown up to make sure that this council is diverse. So I urge that this council is also held accountable for the advancement of African Americans. We will not be paying attention to only the words of the city has offered as lip service, but also the actions that you all choose to stand up for. We need a reparations commission and a racial reconciliation fund that includes arts, culture, and healing at the center. And I'd like to remind everyone in this room, this number, $3,343,866.38. The amount the 40 acres of land will be worth today that is owed and promised to every African American when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This is your forefather. It is now time to repay his debt. Any question about how much commission members will be paid with any mention of its being less than or other members of commissions is irrelevant and disrespectful. Our contributions as African Americans far outweigh most, and we deserve it all. I urge you, your colleagues in the City Council to consider these recommendations as you go through towards budget season. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Aziza, Ms. Robinson, good night for your public testimony. Do we have any others? Is that it? Okay. Thank you. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
I have to go to BU right now, sorry. So I just want to say thank you to Aziza for bringing it to this space and holding all of us accountable to what this moment is all about. So I just want to uplift and underscore that this testimony that you heard here needs a remix, and it needs to be amplified and shared across the halls of power, because that's what this moment requires, is for us to listen. So, and because I have to be somewhere as well, I'm gonna be quick with a few questions. And I'm glad that my chair asked the questions around reparations and that we got you all in the record. As we held the hearing, I was really taken back by the fact that some folks were questioning whether or not commission members should even get paid, because that's not the norm. And just because that's not the norm doesn't necessarily mean that we can't change that. We can't replicate white dominant culture, right? So I really want us, as we continue to have this conversation, for us to recognize that reparations is really about making sure that we right the wrong, and making sure that we honor the intellect and the time and energy that our commissioners are going to put forth towards this work. So we need to find the will and the courage and the dollars to support that work. So with that, I just want to go on record. And I know we have a lot of work to do, and I'm here for it. So I'm going to ask some very specific questions. This is in regards to the Black Men's Commission. And I know, Chief, you had mentioned that the budget that has been allotted is comparable to what we see in other commissions, but I just want to add that the issues that Black men face here in the city of Boston are, you can't compare, right? So I just want to go on record in saying that, when it comes to that line item, that we're going to have to push for more to ensure that Frank and his team are really set up for success. As the person who passed that commission, I'm really gonna be loud about it, and I've stepped to the side because Councilor Roel is the one who's gonna be leading this effort, and I'm just on the sidelines to just help advocate. So I just wanna go on record that that budget line item needs to be revised and brought back to us with something that is going to be more acceptable. That is that. And then, you know, I really do love and appreciate the chair because, you know, this moment is about the work. And this is my third budget season, and I call it a season because it's theatrics every time I come here. The thing that changes are the characters that are in front of us, but there are people who are juggling to make their ends meet, people who are being displaced. We keep talking about a Green New Deal, but I feel like the issues that are impacting our community are often the last on the list. And I'm just curious, as your cabinet, as you start thinking about your priorities, how are we going to uplift the lived realities of so many Black and brown residents that have been dying literally for more? Tell me about that.
I'm struggling between like a technical answer.
I need you to speak from your heart. Okay. I like Claire and everybody else on the IGR, I do not want to see any more PowerPoints. I'm tired of PowerPoint presentations that are full of fluff. I want realness. That's what our people are looking for. So speak from your heart. Tell us what you need so that we can advance our people. This is what I need. I need you to bring it. Tell me from your heart what we need to do differently and what's it going to take for us to move the needle for our people.
What I have learned 4 months into the role is that there are departments with the infrastructure to do, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but like really amazing work, right? And this cabinet is not there right now. Right now it's not. It's not even 2 years old. And so just from a basic organizational development, like it's not there right now, and that's why I'm prioritizing partnerships with housing, partnerships with G-Veto, partnerships with folks that have the infrastructure to put the money where it needs to go. Like, I'm gonna start with that. As for how are we going to prioritize, our greatest asset is that we're community-based. Like, from Frank to Yusufi to Alexandra Valdez to whoever is running the different, from obviously Lori here, we have connections to the ground. What we need to be better about, what I'm hearing, is how do we ensure that the voices that we know have been doing the fight are the ones in here telling us how to do the work.
Right. And
while being.
Yeah, but could I just tell you one thing? Mm-hmm. When the chair asked you about who it was that you interviewed leadership. Right. Instead of interviewing and starting off with rank and file, with people who are working on the front lines, who are being paid less, right? And impacted more. So those interviews, in my humble opinion, should have started with the folks out on the ground to inform your work, right? So I would recommend that if we're really serious as we begin to move this work forward, is that we start with those who are living the realities and doing the work. Not to say that the leadership is not, but if we're really serious about changing the way we do business, the expectation, to the chair's question, is really about leading with the people on the ground doing the work, because you're gonna get a very different answer than someone who's making $90,000 a year, right? Someone who may even have to have 2 jobs just to be able to be a Boston resident. So how can we talk about equity when we're already leading with a framework that does not center the voices of the people who are living the realities, which is one of the things that I think is so frustrating to come into this chamber and represent 700,000 constituents, who none of which oftentimes feel heard. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have an opportunity to really redesign how we're going to lead with the people. And if we're not serious about allocating some resources to that work and putting together a line item where it's going to be community-centered and driven, whether it be reparations or any other issue that we're talking about here in the city of Boston, there needs to be some dollars that are earmarked and put to community organizations, not just the same usual suspects, because everybody goes to the same people, but like other people who are not invited to the table, because people pick and choose who they want to invite. And we know that. I've been on the receiving end. You know, I've had to fight to sit at any little table that I've gone into. So it's just something for you all to think about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Worrell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to run off a few stats. And for me, it's more so just kind of seeing if we as a city have established kind of like baselines on where we're starting at when it comes to equity and where we should be headed. You know, and the chair touched on this, but according to some of the data that I found is, you know, 1 in 4 Boston Black students can read at their grade level. There's a 30-year difference in lifespan, you know, between Grove Hall and Symphony Hall. The median net worth for Black Bostonians is $8. We as a body have collected the top 10 earners in each department, and we saw disparities in that. I've looked at the capital investment over a 5-year time span and realized that the investments have been the lowest in the Black and brown neighborhoods. Can you guys talk to me about what baseline data you guys have found out in your research, or if that's something that you guys are looking forward to doing, and then what corrective action needs to be done in order to bring our communities, our neighborhoods to that level where we're thriving and have the ability to take advantage of opportunities out here?
I think, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this is, if the question is, what is the data that we have collected, each department, right? We are working on sort of developing scope of work of each of the departments to ensure that they are very clear on like, what are the specific issues that we want to address. If it's taking to the example of Frank Farrow running Black Male Advancement, there are hundreds of challenges that he can address. And so something that we're focusing on right now, and that's why we're really grateful that the commission is on officially, is so that they can help Frank focus on like what are the 3 things that we can accomplish, just the point that somebody brought up earlier, so we can have benchmarks of how do we move the work forward. Because I think in full transparency, I think what's been happening is that we want to do all of this, and then all of a sudden we're not setting benchmarks, we're not setting actual clear guidelines as to what is it that we're trying to approach and what is the data telling us. And so I can come back to you more on like what does that look like from a capital investment. I'm not as familiar there as to like what the criteria is, but I will be working with budget, et cetera, on setting those criteria so that we can make sure that what you are saying does not happen again.
Allow me a moment. I think, and please don't take this like the wrong way. I'm trying to reframe it without sounding like I'm interpreting what he's saying, right? So I think the data and the research is already here. He's provided just a list of them, just a small bit of it, but we have the data, the research, we know the problem, we know what to do, we know how to fix it, where we're innovators, we can do it, we know what's good for us, we don't need savior complex in our neighborhoods, we have the data. What he's saying is, how does that inform your work? How are you using it?
I think this is what I'm trying to make clear today, that right now we are ensuring that the different cabinets that have the infrastructure to put in the resources. But I'm going to tell you right now, the budget for FY24 is going to be really different. Right now, we are focusing on the top four recipients of the ARPA funds and the different budgets to ensure that whatever projects they're proposing are going to those specific zip codes and communities that we want to prioritize. I just want to be really honest with my answer. That's where we're at right now.
And I just want to make sure that we're focusing also, you know, this year and next year and the years to come on performance, you know, and those outcomes. And then hopefully when we come back again, that we can speak about, you know, what baseline data, you know, and how we have grown since then. That's very important to me, how we have grown. I know we might not go from 8 to 247,000 in a year, but we want to make sure that we are heading in the right direction in terms of those investments that we are making. But thank you again for all your work. Very important issue here in the city of Boston is equity. We are all elected. Well, the five of us were elected in the time of equity, and we are here in this moment. So let's make sure that we keep on pushing that forward and using that momentum to make sure that we're bringing those outcomes and not just using it as a word.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Royal. Councilor Braden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a whole lot more to ask, but I'm just curious, like, it seems like part of the issue that you folks are up against is that some of these parts of this organization, parts of your department were moved out from under the mayor's office. You know, Mayor Walsh's, Mayor Janey, will come out from under the auspices of the mayor's office and are plugged into a department, and that we don't actually have, you know, on the Office of Resiliency, there's no, the Human Rights Commission has authorizing statutes. I'm just looking, the Black Men and Boys Commission was passed and approved in this council, and it's got authorizing statutes. But the Office of Resiliency and the equity, those things haven't. I don't know if that's an impairment or an impediment to being able to be more organized, but it's a growth process. But I just feel that that's something I'm trying to get my head around. Do the monies come over from the mayor's office and go into this new department, or how is it all funded and organized? And I'm not disagreeing with the importance of this office. It's incredibly important. As you said earlier, it's probably the most important work that we're going to do in this council and this city, is to really address inequities and really work to promote equity across all of our communities and every office and every department in this city. So I'm just trying to get my head around, you know, where are we? Do we need to formalize the structure and have more control over the process as a city council? If we're authorizing funds to be spent, do we actually need to have some authorizing statutes? Do we actually need to have a city council ordinance to organize and structure this in a way that might be more transparent? And that's just an observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. A brilliant observation. Thank you for thinking of that and doing your research. We do have just one public testimony. I ask you that you bear with us so we can get Ms. Priscilla Flint Banks on. Ms. Flint, if you can hear us, let us know when you're on.
I'm here.
Welcome. Ms. Flint, please state your name, affiliation, and address if you so choose, and give your testimony. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
I appreciate the time. I was listening to the hearing and I just felt like I had to say something. I enjoyed what I heard, was hearing the city councilor say the questions that they were asking. And I was really touched by you, Chairwoman, because you have been living the reality, and for you to be sitting in this where you are, it's a blessing. And so I just want to say that we, as people from the community, we as longtime residents of Boston, it is time for us to come together and work together and put our hands together and make some things happen for the people in Boston who have been left out for the last, I don't know how many years. So I just wanted to say that, and I want to thank you. And when time permits, I will be on these hearings because I really want to be able to understand and see how we as community can work with the city council to make sure that we are empowered and that the funding is coming to the people who need it the most. I just want to thank you. I appreciate you, and I'm just looking forward to more of these hearings. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Ms. Priscilla Flint Banks. I really appreciate your testimony, your kind words. I look forward to working with you as well. Today is, once again, thank you so much for bearing with us in this difficult conversation. And this process is one that we're supposed to facilitate a process so that we can ask about budget allocations and understanding how we're using our resources in the city of Boston. Today is the anniversary of the birth of Malcolm X. And in that spirit, when I think about equity, inclusion, diversity, human rights, I think about what my brother Malcolm said in terms of making it plain. I think that we tend to, in government, tend to complicate things and not make it accessible for the people who need it. And in that interest, so what we do is, in order for us to get the funding or to justify why there's a need, my Black body must die before monies are allocated. And so that has been the tradition, and that has been systemically what we've done. And so then we come to here with this office of and full cabinet and diversity and inclusion and race, and we talk about what we're gonna do, and then we continue to see those very systems perpetuated. Black people in Boston, and I'm gonna use that Black African Americans as an example because they are the most vulnerable population in the city of Boston and America, if not obviously Black people as a whole in the world. And so then we talk about addressing the needs of, the most vulnerable. The city then talks about their resources and how much we're so filthy rich and everybody's happy that we can pay back our loans and figure things out at the snap of a finger because we're doing so well. But if I have to die, if my sons have to die before we address issues, that's obviously a problem. And the reason why I use dramatic examples to bring it back to home so that you can connect with me is what I said. I don't see the urgency, the sense of urgency behind this issue. And so I once again ask you, and I've sat with you, I've asked you, I've filed, and we go back and forth, and Council Braden brings up an excellent point that maybe this doesn't need to be, or the structure doesn't need to be under the mayor. Maybe we need to figure out how we're bringing independent parties to do studies, to assess the need, to measure how we're working on equity, to be able to truly transform Boston. This, of course, again, is not a reflection on how the mayor is doing or how you as the administration is doing, but rather that we are all not satisfied with the results. And so I would like to bring you back, and I'm going to ask the council what they think, because we really want to, as Councilman Mejia said, I didn't really understand. I want to understand, I want to see something else, right? And I think we're all saying the same thing today, that this can't be it. This is not as intentional as it needs to be. And so we'll probably get together or figure out how we can work together in doing this. And I'm sorry, Councilor Brian Worrell, did you have another question?
Yeah, I just have one more question. In terms of like when you're making suggestions, you know, whether it's investments or recommendations to the administration or department, can you talk to me about that process? Can you talk to me about that process?
Yeah, we're definitely we're exploring what operationalizing this big project looks like. But right now, in direct conversations with, as I said, James Williamson from OBM and Casey Brock Wilson, as to how do we, already thinking of FY24, what are the specific questions that we're going to be asking? So like in order for you to even submit a budget, there are these specific questions you need to be able to answer. Like that's one thing that we're focusing on. But we don't have the operationalized structure yet, because that has not been, I did not inherit a structure, so that is what we're building right now.
All right. I'm speaking for myself, but also for the members of this body. We would love to be part of that conversation so that we understand it and that we all checking all boxes when it comes to equity. Okay. But in terms of like any suggestions or recommendations that are being made this year, right, to departments or to the administration, what is that process like? Like if there was, like, for example, I believe the sheltered marketplace, is there any other, like, can you tell me how that became into existence and what that process is like? Because I would like to know also what ideas or initiatives that you guys are working on that we're not seeing.
This is an assumption that the different projects have come from different chiefs that have sort of been doing the work and again have that infrastructure. As for what ideas we have, each of the different departments, which some you have heard from, some you will hear more, two more you'll hear from today, they have their specific ideas that I've been supporting them in building out, that they'll be presenting to you today or have presented already. As for the Office of Equity, I'm not going to give you a satisfying answer, because that is what I'm focusing on right now. It's operationalizing the thing that we're talking about today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councilor Coletta, do you have final remarks?
I don't. I'm so sorry. I've been trying to listen in. But just thank you for answering my questions earlier. I have the materials. I will continue to look through them. If I have any additional questions, I'll be sure to go through the chair and ask for them. But I'm grateful for your work, especially with the Human Rights Commission. This is something that I worked on, like I said, as a staffer. So we want to make sure that we're supporting you as best as we can. I'm just double checking my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. No, I think I'm good. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you for, again, bearing with us and your work. I know now I'm sounding like a broken record. We're going to reach out, and we're going to, hopefully you'll allow us to help you to help us, right? Or help us help you. Either way, whatever you need. We want to work with you so that you are well informed and do your work to the best of your capabilities, but also in collaboration with us. I mean that, and I think all of the counselors here, you see that we have the energy and we believe in this. Chief, Lori, thank you very much for all of your work. Your words today were inspiring. I appreciate you going on record and speaking about reparations, all of you. I would ask, just for total transparency, that you actually research what reparations is all about, so that we can lead with that. And then I'm also going to ask Council Braden for us to follow up with you in terms of the structure and operations that you're talking about. Thank you, everyone. And I think in the interest of, like, we only have 20 minutes to eat lunch, let's start the next hearing. I know you're scheduled to be here. Let's start the next hearing about 15 minutes late to allow you to eat your lunch. Is that okay? And then I'll see you at around 2:15. Thank you so much. Meeting adjourned.